Hello, this is Storm Warden coming back at you today with another video update. And today we're going to talk about the upcoming pattern and what we can expect over the next month or so of October, and the patterns that are in play, that are in place. I could not talk right there. Please forgive me. And gonna talk about any upcoming rain chances, cooler air that will be over us, and the potential for some warmer air to be on the horizon this weekend. So we're gonna talk all about that. The weather has kind of calmed down, so it gives us a chance to debrief and not have to focus on anything in the tropics or any big severe weather opportunities. The weather is kind of peaceful right now, which is much needed after what's been a pretty active tropical season. Well, at least the last 3 weeks, it's been fairly active in the tropics. So this is a much needed break, which looks to continue. So we're going to talk all about that today. If you've been liking my weather content, please subscribe as I bring daily weather updates. I do apologize for yesterday's missed update as I had some technical difficulties which didn't allow me to get a video out yesterday, but we're right back at it again today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're starting with the GFS model, and guys, we're just going to go straight through this model run because we're going to give you an idea of what our long range is looking like. So looking at our surface pattern, and what it looks like on the surface level. So generally speaking, you live here in the Carolinas, it looks fairly dry over the next week or so. And really across the country, it looks quite dry at least over the next week or so, with no big troughs, cold fronts, tropical activity at all. So the weather looks quite quiet. Now, there's been more of a signal that we'll probably have a deeper trough that will build in right around Halloween, which could bring some severe weather and maybe even some snow to the northern states, possible. So that is all a possibility, and you can kind of see that we're heading to the cooler months. Once you start to see these blue contours really start to dig south, and you start to see these snow show up in the long range, this really gives us a good idea that we're starting to enter cooler months. We're starting to get closer to that late fall time frame, to that November December time frame, which is the best time of the year in my opinion. And again, what this is going to act to do a couple things. One of those things is that this is going to act to really start to decrease our high temperatures as we continue to go further along. So, as we get to this time of year, our high temperatures here in the Carolinas at least may only be in the lower 70s, upper 60s, and that will continue to drop the deeper we get into November, December, which also is going to act to decrease our ocean temperatures. And with Milton and Helene that had moved through the Gulf, and now with all these troughs moving through the eastern United States, this is acting to really decrease ocean temperatures and allow for tropical activity to pretty much be non existent. And quite frankly, guys, looking at the tropics, I don't really expect any threats to the U.S. at least for the next 10 days, probably even more than that. But I know I can't say for a fact because we know what happens, when we say things like that in the weather world. But I will say with pretty high confidence that I'm not expecting any really big tropical threats to the U.S. at all over at least the next 10 days, maybe going longer than that. So, looking at the long range pattern here, we may go a while without rain here in the Carolinas. And so if that happens, maybe we get into a drought again, and there's some areas of South Carolina that haven't seen rain since some part of August. So I mean, this is not good because this could allow the drought to come back for certain areas. I mean, not August, but September. I know I said August, I meant September, but yeah. So that's a couple things to watch out for. Is maybe some drought conditions over the east, and then we have to watch out for any of these big digging western troughs that may bring some snow and some severe weather to the middle of the country. So we're starting to hit that time of the year now where we're starting to get these deeper troughs that dig in, that help to bring cooler air to areas that typically don't, because even Florida could see some cooler air. So Florida typically doesn't see cooler air like that. And you look back in the past years, particularly 2018, which is almost 6 years ago, I think. Hopefully my math is right there. Where we had our October was very, very warm. So, we had some fairly warm Octobers here in the past, but we seem to be getting a nice little treat here this October with very nice, cool, light fall like weather. and that should persist until that ridge builds over top and we get some warmer air that comes in over us this weekend. But there are signs. Granted, it's very long range, but there are all signs that we do get a deeper trough to move around that Halloween time frame between the, I want to say between the 25th and the 31st. There seems to be some type of big sweeping trough from across the west to the east, which could certainly bring even cooler air. In fact, if you live in the Carolinas, we could be expecting frost Thursday morning and Friday morning. So this is going to show you that we're really getting into that time of the year with Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas coming up. So you know how this time of the year goes for us here in the Carolinas. So that was GFS. Now here's a Euro model, and we're going through time. And again, we're fairly dry here in the Carolinas. I mean, we're going through time, and we're here at hour 200. There's not a drop of rain over us. So again, drought conditions may start to become a concern if this continues well into October, which is certainly a possibility. I don't really see any really good rain chances here in the Carolinas. I really don't. Um, Even across the country, off the Euro model, it looks fairly quiet up until that 25th to that 36th time frame. I mean, 30 not 36. I mean, 31st time frame where we could see a big sweeping trough that develops somewhere over here in the western United States and pushes all across the country. So that is a possibility, but that's out longer in the range, so not necessarily reliable. But one thing I can say for sure that you live in the eastern United States, don't expect a lot of rain this month. It just looks fairly quiet, fairly peaceful, which is obviously much needed after what Helene did to areas of western North Carolina and just saw the bad weather we've gotten over like the last 3 weeks or so from back to back tropical activity. But again, you do want some rain here and there so that we don't enter a drought, which is certainly going to be a possibility if we continue to see these drier conditions persist, which could also bring wildfire concerns in western North Carolina where you have so many trees down from Helene. This could certainly bring a wildfire hazard if these drier conditions persist as well. So a couple of hazards there with the pattern that I'm seeing. Now, looking at the overall upper level pattern, what to expect, you can see our big deep trough that's going to bring us the frost Thursday and Friday morning. This should bring really cool air, probably talking upper 30s, lower 40s. So this will bring frost. Wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of frost advisories for areas of North Carolina. So you want to watch out for that. But you can see our ridge starts to build. Our ridge starts to build in this weekend, which should bring us warmer air sometime this weekend going into early next week. This should bring warmer air. It should allow for temperatures to retreat a little bit. We're not talking 90s and 80s, nothing like that, but we could be talking mid 70s to maybe lower 80s possible. But again, models are forecasting some type of trough to move through later on this month, which could bring even cooler air than what we're seeing now. So again, there's a couple opportunities for that really cold, cool air to move in. But again, some of this stuff is really long out in the range, so it's not necessarily reliable, but it is a possibility. And we're looking at just an upper level pattern. You can see that ridge building over top. And then you can see how that trough starts to move in. And then we kind of go to a zonal look. And basically what a zonal look is when you have these, you see how our pattern just looks pretty straight. You see how our contours are pretty straight. This just signifies that we're looking at a pretty zonal pattern with average weather across the country, across the board really. Average temperatures, average low temperatures, and probably not much precipitation at all across the country. So we look to be going into a fairly dull October with not much big weather events going on. So, just gives everybody a time to just breathe, after what's been a pretty active period of weather. But you can kind of see our pattern's fairly zonal before we get some more troughing later on in the month. Now, looking at the EPS upper level pattern that we have here, and again, kind of the similar thinking to the GEFS upper level pattern. You see our trough moving through, and then we see our ridge building over top, which should give us warmer air this weekend going into early next week, with probably temperatures approaching that upper 70s to lower 80s across the east. You can see across the middle of the country, looks fairly warm before you have a little trough that wants to move through later on this month, which models have been consistently showing maybe some type of big trough across the moving across the country later on this month. But again, a little bit longer out in the range, so you're not gonna talk about too much on that. But again, that is a possibility. So if based on what I'm showing you guys and what I've seen, if I had to make a forecast for October, I would say that our pattern looks fairly peaceful. Honestly, I don't really see a whole bunch of big active weather patterns. I think a couple of hazards that could be at play, especially here across the east, particularly North Carolina and South Carolina, and I could really just say generally the east. We could have some drought concerns if we continue to see this this pattern where we're not seeing a lot of rainfall, which could also lend to the potential for some wildfire hazards in the Western Carolinas, where we had all those trees fall, everything's drying out. You get some windy conditions, and now you're looking at wildfire potential. So again, there's a couple hazards there, which is definitely not good. You don't want to see that at all, especially after all the destruction that Helene did to Western North Carolina. You don't want to see wildfires on top of that, but that will become a risk if we continue to see these drier conditions continue. And quite frankly, guys, I'm looking at the upper level pattern. I don't really see a whole bunch of rain chances. I don't see any really big deepening troughs that could bring us any rain chances. I mean, honestly, after this bigger trough that moves through the next 2 days, it looks like a ridge builds over top, and we're kind of looking at like a warmer pattern with very dry conditions, and then things become zonal to the point where we're looking at just average weather across the board with probably non-existent rain chances going into later on this month. So again, there's October looks like a pretty dull month as far as any big weather patterns. And it's kind of highlighted in the CPC outlook. You can see our warmer temperatures coming back off the CPC. The Climate Prediction Center is predicting that we will see above average temperatures generally across the country as a board. And we're going to the 8 to 14 day outlook. You can kind of see hints of that trough that I was talking about later on this month. You can kind of see that the cooler air is starting to push a little bit more further south and west. You can kind of see hints at that trough maybe becoming something that will be on our doorstep later on this month. But again, you can see, generally speaking, across the country, expect above average temperatures for that ridge building over top. And that ridge building over top will also help keep any tropical activity at a minimum. So again, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We may see drought conditions, but on the other hand, we may see a minimum tropical activity. But if we see minimum tropical activity, that also means that rainfall chances are going to be fairly below normal to maybe even much below normal for the month of October if these signs persist. And looking at a 6 to 10 day precip outlook, you can kind of see how over the east, look at those drier conditions starting to really become increasingly likely. And you're looking at our 8 to 14 day outlook, and we're still in that drier air. So again, if I had to make a forecast for the rest of this month, I would say that we're looking at fairly dry conditions for the month of October here across the east, with average temperatures for the majority of October. We've seen some cool spells earlier this month, like these next 2-3 days where we see a cooler spell. But I do think temperatures warm back up as we get into this weekend, going into next week, and then I think our pattern becomes zonal, and we just get average weather across the board, across the country. Now looking at the tropics, and I talked about this a little bit, guys. There's a 20% chance over in the Caribbean. Probably won't do much of anything. There's a 40% over here. This has dropped from what it was, 50%. This may form, but because of the way our pattern is over the continental U.S., I don't think this is gonna be a threat to Florida, to the Gulf Coast, to the East Coast. I think this will be one of those systems that it may form, but if it does form, it'll probably keep west because you have a huge ridge over top, which if anything does form, it'll probably just keep west into Central America and maybe bringing them some heavier rains and stronger winds. But overall speaking, there's really no threat, and you can kind of see the tropics are starting to quiet down. Cooler waters are starting to really take over here in the Gulf. So again, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of reason of concern from the tropics. At least I'm just not seeing that. And quite frankly, I don't expect any concern from the tropics for at least the next 10 to 15 days if I had to make a more educated guess. I'll say 10 to 15 days. I don't really expect much of a concern though out here in the tropics. Again, this could form into Nadine, which could bring some nastier conditions to Central America because this ridge over top would just help push anything to our west. Because if the thing was to try to go further north, it would be sheared and it would be, punctured with dry air, which means that this would have absolutely no opportunity to really push any further north than where it's at right now. So again, that's my video update for today, guys. Not a very long one, but again, that's what you can expect for your October. Fairly quiet conditions look increasingly likely across the east. So if you've been recovering from any of the bigger storms that come through, you definitely have a lot more time to continue that recovery. And yeah, so I'll be back at you guys another video tomorrow. And again, I know I keep saying it, but I will bring you guys an overview of both Milton and Helene. I'll give you guys a much more detailed overview of how those storms verify, how my forecast verify, because I talked about how I want that to be a tradition of this channel. So not without further ado, but that's all I got. I'm kind of rambling here, so I'm gonna get off.